Welcome to Nubia Cafe. Today we're going to have a conversation and eat good food. The best food, best West African and Caribbean food in St. Louis.
We're here to have a discussion or conversation, if you will, about immigration and its effects on the African American and American community. One of the things that we are is basically absent on the issue of immigration. It's especially true in the African American community. And so, Terry, you've done some research. You're a historian. Mm-hmm. What does it mean to you when you hear the term immigrant? And are African Americans in this country? Are we immigrants?
No, we're not immigrants. That's one of the major things. We did not historically come here out of our own volition. We are the descendants of those who were brought in chains, stolen, to be free labor for somebody else. So it creates a different kind of mentality in our community when you talk about immigration issues, or you talk about immigrants. That's not our direct experience. Though it might be the experience of other people in this country, it is not our direct experience.
Johnson?
I would say that what we experienced was a mass cultural and physical dislocation and a mass physical relocation, forcibly, against our will. But in the American context, what we are is one of the transformational peoples of the Western Hemisphere. We actually were a wave, I guess you call it a migratory, well, not a migratory wave, but a wave of population that brought many different things to the table.
But if we are not immigrants, then what is the term you use to describe for us? Does anybody want to respond? What are we?
Well, I say that we are the descendants of enslaved Africans that were stolen and enslaved. That's what I say.
Let me ask, Nosifo, you are actually an immigrant. Where are you from?
I'm from South Africa.
You're from what part of South Africa?
The Eastern Cape, but I was born and raised in Zimbabwe.
You were born and raised in Zimbabwe?
Yes.
As you look at our experience as African Americans versus your experience, what do you see? You are a true immigrant. What does that mean for you?
For me, the only difference, I can say the main thing is that I came here by choice. I decided to come to the United States, and it is you are all saying that you're descendants of people that were stolen or kidnapped from Africa. You didn't have a choice. As I am here right now, if I decide to go home, I know where I want to go. I will go back home. I know where I'm going back. Most of you have to trace it back, and you don't really know where you came from, and that's the main difference that we have. And it's kind of like an advantage and a disadvantage, but you can trace it back, but it takes you longer than it would for me. I can just pack my bags and go home today and know where I'm going.
And what types of things in terms of cultural, religious, what types of things did you bring to this country that you see that we as African Americans may be lacking by not having a direct relationship with our ancestors?
Mainly it's just the culture, the way most things here are westernized. You're doing things the Western way, and like in African culture, the way sometimes the kids, you bring up your kids and the way you interact with your parents is different from the way things are done here. So,
and even when we try to do something different, I know Balomle, you have really worked hard to raise your children in an African tradition. What has that meant for you?
It means instilling within my children the sense of belonging, having a sense of belonging to Africa, which is where we all originate from, and to have a pride in that, and also have knowledge about that, because we, particularly if your experience is simply from an American perspective, Black people will think that our history kind of begins at slavery. Right. Mm-hmm. And my goal is to help my children to know that we have full life even before enslavement. And so to help us to to reconnect with that and use that knowledge to help fuel our direction and that kind of thing, our identity, you know, to have a strong identity and to want to belong.
If I could jump on that, and I think that's a key element, that first of all, for us to realize and not define ourselves as just the descendants of slaves. Now, we're not taught that in the public school system. You know, they may begin with slavery, and if you begin there with a people, then that defines them, that gives them an identity of being slaves even in 2010. And that's something that our children do not really want to identify with. Who does?
Exactly, who does?
But the greatness of our historical past, the greatness of the continent of Africa is something that people would want to connect to because of its contribution, its major contribution. All the civilization started there. But it is difficult for people to kind of make that bridge because of the cultural discontinuity that we have had.
That's right.
What happened in slavery was to disconnect us not only from that history, but from that culture. And that did not happen by accident. We must be clear about that. People just didn't, as one of our elders in St. Louis says, and Africans just didn't walk off the boat and suddenly forget everything that they had in Africa. That didn't happen. There was a process that we know is called the seasoning process. It was designed to create a new identity, a false identity, because you did not want people who you were going to try to get to serve you in free labor to remember a culture that predates yours.